Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lambremont Weber, and today we're joined again with an extraordinary panel with hermeneuticist, the Einstein of hermeneutics. I'm not sure if now that we've gone beyond the quantum, we'll have to find another sign. Peter Kling.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I wonder how many people are actually going to understand that. but it is an honorable introduction. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Well, today's panel, Peter and I have been doing these panels each month now in the build-up to the events, false flag event, in fact, and that'll be discussed somewhat during this panel, that popped up to be occurring during the Jade Helm and tetralunar eclipse period, that is September 23rd to 28th, 2015, with Jesuit Pope Bergoglio, Barack Obama, the UN, the Pope being in the UN and in the US Congress, announcing, quote, the post-2015 millennial goals, and which many people see as opening up to, quote, the New World Order, which could be interpreted as a deep mind, based on human neural patterns, artificial intelligence takeover of up to 75% of the human population. The opposite of deep mind AI would be soul connected and source or God connected. And so there's a lot of science and speculation behind this, and Peter is an expert on the hermeneutics. So today we'll be covering that, as well as I guess it's the future of how interdimensional intelligence, archonic AI and other, is trying to be part of the struggle for the future of the third dimension. Did I represent our conversation?
I would say, yeah, absolutely, because that's where we want to go. What we want to look at today is essentially everything that brought us up to where we are, but we're going to do that very quickly, and we're going to do it in a science-based way so we can understand who we really are and what we're really dealing with, because both are important. If we don't know who we are, at least at the soul level, then all of this really doesn't make any difference. We can be deceived and give up our power through the beta state of fear, where the fight and flight response is. And once we hit that responding to a fear input, we now have to react we're in a reactionary situation. And so we are no longer capable of long-term planning. Now, you go back 100 years ago, and everybody pretty much did long-term planning because their eating depended on it. They depended on planting their gardens. They depended on their crops. They depended on breeding their livestock. They depended on planning for the year and the year after that, understanding how all this was going to work out. And yet we have been reduced to living in an I want it now society. We hardly plan for the rest of the day. What do you want to have to eat tonight? I don't know, honey. What do you want to have to eat? I don't know. Let's go out. There's nothing in the refrigerator anyway. So, that's where we are. What happened to the year-long planning? Out. We can do everything right now with our iPhone or our smartphone, and do what we order dinner out and get the car to rent to go there and conduct all the business that we need right from our little smartphone. We don't have to do anything. It's smart enough for us. There's an app for that. Unfortunately, there's not an app to get us out of the situation that we're facing right now. And to really understand it, we need to understand who we are and where we came from. These are some subjects that I covered in Letters to Earth. We're going to cover them again here quickly, and we're going to do it with science, and we're going to do it with the science of string theory, go right back to where basically everything starts. Now, the interesting thing about string theory is it also gave birth to M theory and then superstring theory. And how it did that is that several teams of mathematicians were trying to verify the first team of mathematicians' data, and they came up with totally different data. And they said, well, wait a minute, why do we have totally different data, but we got the same answer? And so now they started examining why I know at least 4 teams of mathematicians, all using different mathematical equations, came up with the same answer. And then they took it to the next level. Now, the answer that they came up with, which is string theory, starts at the string level, or at the level of pure dynamic energy, which is now what they call the God particle, and why they built CERN, to collect God particles, or to possibly scuttle the planet. I'm not quite sure which one, considering that they have the destroyer of life as their symbolic patron God, I suppose you would call it. Shiva, isn't it, that they've adopted in the 666 logo? Makes you wonder if CERN isn't meant to scuttle the planet somehow, or possibly control something else that's going on, which is the Schumann resonance of the planet, which normally vibrates at 7.8 hertz and has been recorded as high as 64 hertz. 64 hertz for the human brain is gamma. It's beyond beta. Beta goes from 13 up to 35 hertz. Beyond that is gamma, and the only life forms on this planet that have capability of thinking in gamma are dolphins, and it requires both hemispheres of the brain to operate at the same time. For humans to do it, eventually our brains would go into overload, and we would pass out, faint of fear, go into a fever, whatever. Have you ever been in an accident, Alfred, and everything seems to be going in slow motion?
Well, I've had not an accident, but I've had displacements. I mean, driving along on one overpass in New York City, and suddenly we're driving along on a different overpass.
Well, that's not quite the same thing.
Not quite the same thing.
I'm not sure what that was, but you ask anybody who's like been in a pretty bad accident, everything seems to be going in slow motion, and the reason for that is that our brain is trying to process everything at the gamma level, or at least in high beta. And some people say, oh, I saw my whole life go before my eyes. Well, how does, however old you are, flash before your eyes if you're not in gamma, which is calling the information back as quickly as it can? It's operating at such a high operating speed. So, but that's not natural for us. We like to operate in alpha. Alpha is the vibration just above where the Earth vibrates at. The Earth vibrates in theta naturally, about 7.8 cycles per second. From 4 cycles up to 8 cycles is theta, and from 8 cycles to 12 cycles is alpha. Alpha is where we do long-term planning. Alpha is where we pray, it's where we meditate, and it's where we make love. We do not feel love in beta. We feel love in alpha. When you are with people that you love, you are relaxed. Your guard is let down. Chances are, unless you're with Uncle Bill, who's the family clown, you don't have to worry about being in beta. You know, whatever the case might be. You can sit back and you can relax. When you are with that special someone, and even meeting for the first time, and wow, the chemistry is just fantastic, because you're communicating in alpha. Now, it's a scientific fact that we communicate with each other in the state of beta. I'm sorry, in the state of theta, one level down from alpha. When the brain reaches 7 hertz per second, the hippocampus of the brain opens up, the right hemisphere turns on, and provided that the Earth is also quiet, beating at its, vibrating at its normal 7.8 or hertz per second or thereabouts, we can literally connect with every other human brain vibrating at 7 hertz or less. I had a dream about you last night. Really? What'd you dream? I had almost the same dream. I tried to dream about you too. You know, that doesn't necessarily happen often. What we experience more is remembering dreams on maybe the other timelines, or a dream of a problem that we were facing at work or in life somewhere. But when we dream, we dream in theta and delta. Delta is below 4 cycles per second. You are either in deep sleep or you are in a coma in delta. Delta is where we have out-of-body experiences. That is where the soul has left the building, along with, while the consciousness has left the building, the soul is somehow still connected to it. Don't ask me how, but unless the body dies, the soul doesn't leave. And therein is part of our explanation. Now, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, who's God to begin with? And we talked about this before, and some people, I've even done a little video about it. Who or what is God? We know at the state of the singularity, and if you've listened to Dr. Mikio Kaku, your favorite physicist, they take us back to the singularity, when that string energy was all that existed. Now, in atomic form, the string, which vibrates the atom, neutron, electron, proton, or photon, doesn't make any difference. That string is extremely small because the atom is made up of 1 part solid to 4 trillion parts of empty space. We are nothing more than hard light. Our physical world is made up of very little more than a hard light. Think of that. 1 part solid for 4 trillion parts of empty space, like dropping a pea into the volume of the sun. How much space is in this that we think is reality? Only 1 part of it in 4 trillion parts is real. And it's made up of light. Some of it is hard. Some of it has electromagnetic forces attached to it, which make it feel hard, especially when electrons are added. We actually never touch anything. It's electrons coming in touch with electrons, which give us the sense of sensation of feel. So interesting. That's how it all works. Now, so what caused this pure dynamic? Well, let's take it back to the singularity. The singularity is explained in scripture as before me nothing existed, and after me there will be nothing, or nothing existed. And we know one of the first laws of physics is that we can neither create nor destroy energy. We can only change its form. Doesn't say how many different forms we can change it into, but chemistry today has worked miracles, and we've changed petrol into various ways, things that we shouldn't even have done. We've opened up a genie in that bottle through chemistry, unfortunately, and I was part of that. Sorry about that. I was also a globalist at one time. Forgive me. I know better. I think we've all learned a lot over the years, and if we haven't, then we're part of the sheeple who aren't paying attention to these words now. So here we are. If we cannot create energy, nor can we destroy it, and at its most pure form, it vibrates like string, pure dynamic energy, then there could have only been this that existed. And we know it had to be conscious because we're conscious. And it was most likely alive because we are alive. As a matter of fact, the earth is alive. And Dr. Mikio Kaku, after he read Letters to Earth, he took his own advice in sending me down to philosophy, and he took a trip himself and came to the understanding that, in fact, the whole universe might be God. It might be alive. Indeed, it is. And through fractal technology, fractal science, we can prove this. We ourselves start off as a sperm and a seed, a little human ovum. And in there, when they're combined, It creates a complete cell from which divides us into who we are today. And by the time you hit your adult life, you are host to over 1 trillion different life forms inside and outside and all about your body, enjoying themselves, and you don't even know it unless they get upset. And it makes me wonder, do we have 2 bacteriums sitting in our gut right now wondering if Alfred Webre is real or not? Yeah, just a figment of your imagination. Go on. Everybody knows we evolved. Did we? If you look at what the scriptures say, we were more than likely genetically engineered. If you look at what the Anunnaki say, we were genetically engineered. We'll talk about the difference in a second. But what was it that turned the singularity into what is dictated by the mathematics of string theory as being the 10 dimensions of the multiverse in which we live? Now, by my best guess, it was love. What a fantastic concept. The more you give, the better you feel. The more you get, the better you feel. And it works on so many different levels. I can love all of you right now. I can love the computer that's coming across here. I can love my car. I can love my dog. I can love my kids. If there was another significant other in my life, I could love her too. But that's besides the point. You can love yours like no one else can. And that's what is important. And what is most important is our family. And yet, our family has been fractured, starting with the radical 60s and the funding of the Rockefeller Foundation and so many of the new way of thinking of liberation and where we should be separate and where we're all better. And now we have families that have nobody to watch their kids. We put our children in institutions and let Hillary Clinton's voice say, oh, well, the village needs to raise the child. Well, yes, if the village was made up of our family, that would work out fine. However, most people do not know their next door neighbors by first name. Anyway, love is the key. And this soul of, or this pure dynamic singularity of the multiverse, or that became the multiverse, used this key, as it says in 1 John, the 4th chapter, the 8th verse, God is love. He wanted company, wanted to feel that love. So what happened? He created the Word. 1 John says the Word was, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. Some translations say the Word was God. But it says that all things came into existence through the Word. Let's take a look at this through science, through string theory. We know that we basically can't have 2 things occupying the same thing at the same time. Well, unless we're on the quantum level, we can. But we've got 2 different personalities made up of very dynamic energy, kind of like having 2 suns. Most solar systems are binary. It's believed that ours is too. But you've got 2 different energy forms, the Father and the Son. The singularity, and now what the singularity created, the Word, and we know by pure mathematics it's going to take at least 3 dimensions to house these 2 life forms, and that's what they are, life forms. Now let's talk about the Word. Through the Word came everything else. Dimension 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've got 3 dimensions plus that hand's messed up, sorry folks. We've got 3 dimensions plus 4 dimensions, 7 dimensions, which are spatial planes which are needed in order for our 3-dimensional holographic light world to become physical and even exist. Interestingly enough, that those 7 dimensions do just fine without us. They don't need us at all. So now let's use a little logic here. We have 2 life forms in the first 3 dimensions. And then we have dimensions 4, 5, 6, and 7, which we know are needed to be here, or we wouldn't be here. And we exist in the physical 3 dimensions of 8, 9, and 10, making up the complete 10 dimensions needed for 4 different groups of mathematicians' theory to make string theory, M theory, and superstring theory work out. All of which play a part in the Bible itself. Now, it's very interesting that the Temple of Solomon breaks this down. The most holy is the first three dimensions. The most holy is where the Ark of the Covenant sat, and over the Ark of the Covenant sat what they call the Shekinah light. It was a light source that just appeared. It was an energy that was always there. And the only one that was allowed in the most holy was the high priest, who signified the Word, the Christ, the Messiah. Now, in dimensions 4, 5, 6, and 7, all the priest class were allowed. But no one who was not part of the priest class was allowed in there. All those who were not part of the tribe of Levi and not part of the priest class were allowed to enter the temple. They had to stay outside in the courtyard of the temple. And that is the physical 3 dimensions, which actually is bigger than the temple, the holy, and way bigger than the most holy. The physical dimensions are the largest of the 10 dimensions. Everything else is small and fits inside, just like one of those little Russian nesting dolls. It's a projection of light energy. You ever go to a planetarium and they project the stars on the heavens, on the ceiling above? And this is where you are, and this is where we are. It's all light energy projected into the 3rd dimension, or actually into the 8th, 9th, and 10th dimension, where we consider the physical world to be. Now, it would make more sense that before life existed in the physical 3 dimensions, which do not need to exist in order to make all the rest work, that life would occur first, considering it started with life. It became more life in the first 3 dimensions. It would make more sense that in dimensions 4, 5, 6, and 7, you would have the most life, like cherubs, seraphs, and all sorts of other angels. Maybe this is where the 3-dimensional aliens came from, since most people don't have any concept that dimensions 4, 5, 6, 7, or 1, 2, and 3 exist. They believe we're 1, 2, and 3, and everything else is a higher spatial plane. No, everything else fits inside. That's why Dr. Mikio Kaku said that we could have a T-Rex running through our living room right now and we would never know it because it existed in another dimension, which made me ask Dr. Kaku, is it possible that we could be inside the living room of God right now and not even know it because we exist in a different dimension? Yeah. You see, it works both ways. It works both ways. Here's the problem. Being physical, we cannot physically leave the 3rd dimension. We can leave the 3rd dimension at the soul level or at the consciousness level. And we do that in theta and delta, either in a state of foreseeing, as the Farsight Institute does, where the brain runs at 8 to 4 hertz per second, or in deep comatose type sleep, where we can have an out-of-body experience and actually feel like we are somewhere in real time. While in a coma in Westchester County Hospital 20 years ago, an entity came to me and said, "Come with me." And I got to watch the birth of my youngest son in real time. Some hours when I came to, my mother was standing over me, and the first words out of my mouth were, "Ma, go make a phone call. The baby was born." And she looked at me like, "Huh?" Oh, and then her expression her expression changed, and she said, "Okay." And she went off and made the phone call I requested, and I passed out again. And next time I came to, she said, she was there standing over me again, and she said, "Congratulations, you have a son." So that was a conscious out-of-body experience. I was at the location where she was giving birth in real time and got to see the birth. And who was that? They came and got me and said, "Come with me." They also returned me back to my body, and I remember laying there feeling so happy and so content that I got to see the birth of my youngest son, even though I was in a coma in a hospital about 50, 75 miles away. Interesting, but that's how that all works. We are connected to each other at the soul level, and we can prove it scientifically. And now that our technology is advanced enough that that happens, we connect mentally once our brains reach the vibrational speed of 7 hertz per second. Ding, lights go on, everybody's home. All minds on the planet could know what all the other minds are thinking all at the same time. Think about the computing power of 7 billion brains, all tied together. Think about the soul connection of 7 billion souls all tied together. Think about that connection going back through dimensions 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the connection back to the soul, to the singularity of the multiverse. Think about the conscious connection and the power that we can draw on that pure dynamic energy, which is the soul of the 10 dimensionals in which we live. So how do we get to where we are today? What happened in dimensions 4, 5, 6, and 7 that caused dimensions 8, 9, and 10 to get this screwed up as they are now, where we've got one class of people ruling over another class of people and extracting members of that same class as authority figures to go in and legally kill them? What the hell is that all about? You don't see the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds on the front lines. Oh, yes, we did see the prince, one of the princes of England in Afghanistan, I believe, carrying out his helicopter duties or whatever it was he did. Thank you very much for going and killing more of your, well, maybe not your cousins, but mine. Princess Diana said that they were reppies for some reason. I'm sure she had her own understanding of what she saw, but that's another show completely. She's no longer with us. Maybe one day she'll be able to tell us the complete story of what she saw, but that brings us to where we are more so today. What happens? It happened in those 4, 5, 6, and 7 dimensions that are needed to keep us here, where more than likely the cherubs, the seraphs, and all the other interdimensional life forms, we don't know how many, but we know that based on the information, there were the Watchers. They were called the true sons of God, and then the sons of God, or the sons of the true God, I should say. And then we know Jesus claimed to be just like his father. The word would, if he was the first, the first creation, the first time. You have to look at it almost like biology. When a cell it divides, the DNA splits, and then the cells separate. So if you have pure dynamic energy and it's going to separate, what's it going to separate into? I guess anything that it would want to, but more than likely there's going to be a lot of pure dynamic energy in that's going to have the soul content of who we call Jesus or Yeshua or the Messiah. Either way, it's the soul content which is the most important. That's why we want to make that soul connection with our significant other. That's why we feel so good when there's that chemistry that we feel among ourselves. You walk up to somebody and say, "Are you awake?" If they are, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I'm awake. I've been awake since whatever year it was." And then you have a conversation. If they look at you, you're like, "Awake? Yeah, I woke up 6 o'clock this morning, came to work. What are you talking about? Don't I look awake to you?" Then they don't have a clue what you're talking about. Are you prepared? Oh yeah, I'm prepared. I got more than an empty refrigerator in my house. Don't worry about it. You know, so it's that consciousness that we've developed among ourselves that have allowed us to get a leg up on the situation. What are we getting a leg up on, though? Interestingly enough, when we start examining the scriptures, and don't even think about religion in the scriptures, they don't go together. The Bible has nothing to do with religion. Oh, yes, it does. The church says it does. Wait a minute. For over 1,000 years, the church burned Bible readers at the stake. That's a fact. The church caused the blood of literally my ancestors, according to the research that my cousin did. My ancestors fled religious persecution by the church in the 16th century. From France, they migrated to Germany. Yeah, they were part of the Reformation against the church. Church didn't like that, decided to go kill them. So I'm only, and it's interesting. Here I am. Some people might say, oh, you must be reincarnated from one of your ancestors. I doubt it. More than likely, I'm a genetic throwback, and I was educated for a reason when I was at the age of 4. So someone was watching over me, and indeed, the scriptures do say that in the last days the angels would be directing the work. It also says, if you read Acts the 2nd chapter, it says that some of my spirit would be poured out upon all sorts of flesh, and your sons and your daughters would prophesy, and your young men would have visions, and your old men would dream dreams. And upon my men servants and upon my maid servants I shall pour out my spirit, and they will prophesy. And so everyone that brings a little piece of the puzzle together, and their family thinks they're nuts because of what they're talking about. Don't worry about it. Jesus said a prophet isn't accepted in his hometown. How many times somebody has said, my family thinks I'm crazy that I talk about these things. Don't worry about it. So does mine for the most part. So we're throwbacks to, we've got that woman's seed within us, which is a connection back to where we originate from. The woman was not Eve. The woman is what we call Gaia, kindly called Gaia. And it's where life actually started from, but it goes back before that. See, there's a reason why Yahuwah, which is the correct pronunciation for the tetragrammaton, or the singularity, Yahuwah is the spark of life, hence the male form. It's the seed or the sperm which gives spark to the life of the ovum carried by the woman. And it is the woman who then nurtures and grows that seed or that ovum into a fetus, and then into a child which is given birth to. And that child then gains, if it is a woman child, indeed, it is born with about 400,000 eggs in its ovaries. Why such a fantastic reproductive system if we only live 80 or 90 years at the most? Some of us make it 100, a little bit more, very few. It would take 35,000 years to use all those eggs, passing one a month. Why are women born with that amount of eggs if we if we evolved? Why would we have a great brain capacity if we evolved? Protein. How much protein did we eat? Is why the dinosaurs went extinct. So we have to look at engineering, what it means. We go back to the scriptures, we get some information. In Genesis, where you get the whole creation account, which can actually be verified by science, and it didn't happen in 6 24-hour days. I'll go along with the 15 billion years that science dictates, even though that might be wrong because of accelerated experiences. But let's use that as a timeline, because time doesn't really exist anyway. It's only a perception of where we are on this planet at this point in time. Time only exists because we observe time. That's the only reason. Time is the variable dimension among all. Cosmic time is equal. One cosmic day is equal to 1,000 Earth years. We know the faster that you approach the speed of light, time slows down, and faster than the speed of light, time is inconsequential at that point, at least Earth years. So all this fits scientifically. It all comes together, no matter how you slice it. The Bible points these things out. And what the Bible points out is it says, let us, who's it talking to? Let us make man in our image. And in God's image, he made them male and female. Now, who made the Taj Mahal? I forget the actual ruler's name. I looked it up the other day, as a matter of fact, but I forgot his name. Escapes me at the moment. But he didn't go out and cut all the blocks and assemble them. He financed it. And so when it says God made them, he gave the order. Make them just like us. Where? At the physical level? No, because flesh and blood can't leave the third dimension. We're made in the image of what we call God, or made in the image of the consciousness of the singularity at the soul level. That's why we all want to ascend. It's the connection at the soul level. Having conscious knowledge and accurate conscious knowledge of why we are here and what our mission is what is important. You see, when you look at the scriptures, we are made in the image of those within that fourth dimension called heaven, dimensions 4, 5, 6, and 7, and in the dimension of the word and the singularity. It's all the same soul level. We're all connected. Everything is connected. And humans in the flesh, in the physical form, are connected to this very planet. Change the mass, change of the planet, and it is going to change our physical form. As the mass of this planet increases, we will become shorter. Once the Earth did not contain the physical mass that it has now. And that's scientifically provable by the fact that I believe it's between 50, they're not quite sure, between 50,000 and 500,000 metric tons of space debris land on planet Earth every year. So let's just say it's 50,000 metric tons that land a year. Let's calculate 3 billion years that the Earth's been around and do the math. It's easy. Or if you only go back to 500 million years since the Cambrian period, or the 200 million years since the dinosaurs were here. The fact is, Earth has gotten more massive, and we can calculate that roughly based on the amount of space debris, or the amount of dust and rock and small meteorites that strike the planet every year. So I would imagine that thousands of years from now, we'll be a little bit shorter. Millions of years from now, if we're still here, we'll be a little bit shorter more. But we're going to get a chance to expand from here. This is a temporary situation. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. So here we are in the third dimension. If you look at what it says in Genesis, there's certain orders that are given. And within those orders, all of a sudden, we have the Cambrian period, an explosion of life. At the end of the Cambrian period, and yeah, I know what the fossil record says, we can track it all the way right up to modern human. We know before us there was Cro-Magnon, before that Neanderthal, before that we go all the way straight on back. You go to any good museum and they'll have a decent display there. It's all written in stone. It's not written in stone at the soul level now, is it? Our physical form is dictated by the planet, period. Our soul connection is dictated by the soul of the multiverse. Now, what happened? Recorded in Genesis, and also as the Anunnaki would tell you in their story, they came to and they told the Sumerians that we created you from lower life forms, which is kind of true, because Cro-Magnon man, no doubt, is very similar to us in form, shape, stature, and brain capacity, but he didn't have the soul connection. The soul connection came from the only place that it could come from, the creator of life itself, and that would be back to Yahuwah, or the singularity. But once that connection was broken, and there's several different ways to explain how it was broken. When we go back and look at the actual fruit that was hanging on the tree, and here's where we get the first direct involvement by non-human intervention, more than likely by who's called the covering cherub of Eden, who shape-shifted into reptilian form and tricked the woman, who incidentally, now here's where we go to Genesis 2. The woman was clearly genetically engineered. The account is in Genesis, the 2nd chapter. It starts off saying, in the second chapter, recounting the creation of Adam. It says that he was made from the elements of the ground, and into his nostrils the breath of life was put, or his soul entered. Our breath. By what is written, our soul is directly connected to the blood. How our blood flows, how our soul is in our blood. Hence, blood sacrifices that they make at the Circle of Nine, using the most pure souls that they can, the souls of the 500,000 children that vanish off this planet every year, and without a trace. Go look up Loosh and help yourself. That's all I'm going to say about it. Loosh. So the soul is in the blood, and the soul, according to Genesis 9:5, belonged to Yahuwah. It says that I shall ask back the soul from every living creature. Yes, all good dogs do go to heaven, and considering there are no bad dogs, just bad owners, they all go to heaven, along with anything that has blood that goes through its body, qualifies as a living soul. However, they don't all qualify as being made in the image of God or being made in the image of Yahuwah. There's the difference. The human soul is made in the image of Yahuwah, as it is in the Word, and as it is as in the cherubs, the seraphs, and all the other angels, because, as it says in Scripture, we were created a little lower than them. We already covered physically and scientifically that we are not much more, or we are exactly physical light. We're all the same thing. It's all string vibrating at a different speed, and depending on how it's arranged with electrons, protons, or photons, depends on what's made up in our physical world. But the life forms in dimensions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, dimensions that can enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 do not play by the same rules as we do. They can come and go between dimensions. When you read the account of Job, the first chapter, the 6th verse, it says, and the day came that the sons of Yahweh entered before him, before his very presence. So they all had to kind of physically think about this. They all had to go wherever they were in the dimension, in the 4-dimensional universe that they live in, to the first 3 dimensions. They had to check in. And the account says that Satan entered right along with them. And Yahuwah said, from where do you come from? And where was he? On earth. He said, well, I was on earth and roving about in it. He came from the 10th dimension back to the first dimension, or the presence of the first dimension. He entered the first 3 dimensions to be within the presence of the creative force, Yahuwah. But the account says he came from earth to get there. Pure, interdimensional. I don't know how else to describe it. Can you add to that, Alfred? When you leave our 3-dimensional world, travel through 4 other dimensions to get to the first 3, that's interdimensional to me. And how would you know if they were interdimensional? You see, when we look at the account in Enoch, where it talks about the watchers, the biblical account says that they were the sons of the true God, the sons of the singularity, the sons of Yahuwah. And they saw that earth women were hot. Essentially, they were first cousins. Interdimensional, 3-dimensional breeding. Go awry created the Nephilim, which when they died, according to the book of Enoch, their souls were not wanted in heaven, nor could they be taken by their fathers as requested, but according to Enoch, were bound to the earth. Hence, we get demonic forces and poltergeists. Interestingly enough, if you look at the account of Legion, which is recorded in the Gospels, one human was host to at least 1,000 different interdimensional, or these were the souls of the Nephilim, more than likely, who are quasi-interdimensional, but they could all fit into the human body and accompanied the human soul. Think about that. An interdimensional. Now remember, our physical world, 1 part solid, 4 trillion parts of empty space. And we have shape-shifting reptilian rulers governing this planet. Interesting. According to the Gospel and Legion, there could be 1,000 in one body. But it gives interesting light into the book of Daniel, where it talks about the prince of Persia having a wrestling with who we know as a messenger of Yahuwah, the angel Gabriel. And the prince of Persia was way too powerful for the interdimensional Gabriel. We also know that Gabriel was an interdimensional because he was delivering a message directly from Yahuwah to the prophet Daniel. Gabriel had to go get the archangel Michael to fight the interdimensional prince of Persia, so that Gabriel could deliver the message. Gabriel is also, is recorded as giving the message to the young Hebrew woman Mary. What did he say? Congratulations. We put a zygote of the child of God inside of your womb. Essentially, the soul that was contained within the word, that pure dynamic energy, was put into a human fetus and, beam me in, Scotty, implanted in as a human embryo. A science that we can do right now without any issue. A science that we can clone using that same science, and we could actually use the uterus of a cow as a host. Scientific proof. Are cows being used to clone quasi-human alien life forms? I put money on that. That's a safe bet. We know that there's a cloned alien army on Mars. We know there's a clone, well, we're told through insiders, we're told that there's probably one on the moon, and we're told that the Nephilim are in cloned bodies underground here on Earth. So take that as it may. When are they all going to show up? See, we're dealing with these different life forms now in physical form in our world. And so we get groups like the Galactic Federation of Light, because people don't have this concept of dimensions 4, 5, 6, and 7 where interdimensionals live. But let's go back to the biblical record. Revelation 12 says war broke out in heaven. And it was between Michael and his angels and the great dragon, great reptilian, and its angels, or interdimensionals. And it says that there was no longer a place found for it in heaven any longer. And so down to where? The earth, the devil was cast, having great anger, knowing he has a short amount of time. The Lord's Prayer goes something like, may your will be done in heaven and also upon the earth. Well, by best estimates, that will was carried out in dimensions 4, 5, 6, and 7 just around or prior to 1914, just a little over 100 years ago. We know that because war broke out on earth after war broke out on heaven. Woe, woe, woe for the earth, because the devil has come down to you having great anger. Who's the devil? The interdimensional cherub that was once the covering cherub of Eden, which separated us at the soul level from Yahuwah. Now, when we read the account of the creation, it takes us to a cloning of the woman from the man. The man was created out of the elements and was given the breath of life. The soul entered. But when we read the account of the woman, it says that God caused a sleep to come. It says that God saw that it was not good for the man to be alone, so he created a helper for him. So he caused a sleep to come over the man, and he opened the flesh, he removed a rib, and he turned the rib, closed over the flesh. Let's get that part right. I don't want to have any parts left out. Closed the flesh over and made the rib into a woman. Clear genetic engineering. I had 2 Jehovah's Witnesses come to my house years ago. They don't come anymore. And I said, well, you know, we understand the Bible pretty much the same, but I understand it a little bit differently. And I sent my son to get my Bible, and he brought it out. And I said, here, I'll explain to you. And I went back to Genesis 2, and I read that same exact thing to them. And I said, you see, that's a record of genetic engineering. And they went, Two bobbleheads. Two bobbleheads. You can't deny the record. And the Anunnaki record says the same thing. Now, it's interesting that when they ate, they were told, don't eat that fruit, it's going to kill you. Well, let's take a look at our DNA today. Our DNA is linear, and at the end of each end are what are called telomeres. They are like the plastic ends of shoelaces, keeping the DNA from unraveling and coming apart. What if the telomeres were a virus? What if our DNA was circular, was round, actually shaped like an infinity sign? Because if you look at our DNA now, it kind of has that little kink in the middle, and then the strands go off on its own. Go look it up on Google Images or something, and look up human DNA, and you'll see how the chromosome is set up. It's already spun around in a helix, we know that, but connect the helix back together. You don't need telomeres. And when it splits, it would split at the middle and come apart at the middle, and it would be good forever. Because the reason we die is because we run out of telomeres at the end. Well, if there were no telomeres and it was connected at the middle, then guess what? Our bodies theoretically should I'd say reproduce, but essentially rebuild themselves once every 7 years. 7 years? Yeah. It takes 7 years for the human body to rebuild itself. It takes 10 years for the human brain to rebuild itself. Think about that. Our body gets built in a 7-dimensional time frame, and our brain takes 10. The number for earthly completeness is 10. The number for spiritual completeness is 7. The number for spiritual incompleteness is 6. Our spiritual connection, or our soul connection, was broken at the same time that our DNA was destroyed. Now, interesting thing happens here. You see, when the woman was created and brought before the man says, at last, this is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones. This one was taken from man. He knew, Adam knew, that she was genetically engineered from a part of his own body. This one was taken from man. I will call her woman. And they were naked, the account says. They were good with it. They ate the fruit. They stopped being naked. They realized they were naked, and they went and covered themselves. Now, when we make love, we have a tendency to take our clothes off and get naked, and we're good with it. We don't have any fear. We're in the middle of some of the most beautiful, passionate sex, and making love to someone is just beautiful. And we have no fear. We have bliss. There's just that harmony that is happening at that point. But after they ate the fruit, that bliss disappeared. They became afraid. First, they realized they were naked, and when they heard the voice of Yahweh, they became afraid, and they hid themselves. First they covered, then they hid. They were no longer in alpha, and we know that because they became afraid. Fear is a beta response. And so now life forms who had free will and who thought in alpha no longer only thought in alpha love. They now have the capability of thinking beta, and were afraid. And indeed, just that capability, that in fact that their DNA was damaged, they could never pass on good DNA to their offspring. And when we get to the account of Cain killing Abel, a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, Cain was the seed of Satan. Eve had sex with Satan, and that's how we got Abel." No, because if that would have happened, then Satan would have received the same damnation as the Watchers did for their having intercourse with human women, and he would have been hauled out of here a long time ago and put into a different dimensional world outside of our 10. Because in the account, that's what happens to those who left their position and came to Earth. I believe the account says there was about 200 of them. But he's still here, large and in charge. And if he wasn't large and in charge, if the Anunnaki propaganda wasn't large and in charge, he could have never made that little deal with Jesus. If you worship me, I'll give you all the governments of the world. We're going to talk about this in a second here. So here we have a biblical version of what happens. we have also the Sumerian version through the Anunnaki. And which is the preferred version? Oh, the version where we came from chimps. But you know, at least the Anunnaki said, we created you from lower life forms. Academia says, oh, it just happened by itself. God doesn't exist. Neither do aliens. Neither do interdimensionals. It's all just nice mythological thinking. Really? Really? How many of you listening to my voice can attest that they are wrong? And indeed, we do have interdimensionals, or what we consider aliens. Now, why are they physical? And, you know, here's an interesting thing, Alfred. If you notice, what more and more people are channeling or reporting back to whistleblowers is that these aliens are shape-shifting, or they're also tying them into interdimensional. Something I said 7 years ago in Letters to Earth, and now all of a sudden they become the aliens that are here to help us are interdimensionals. Oh, okay. I mean, they can't exactly argue that, but now what's the message that they're bringing? We'll cover that. So we know, based on both Anunnaki text and biblical scripture, that we are dealing with interdimensional life forms which have separated us from the Creator at the soul level. Now, it's just a matter of lying to us and changing our history. If we look at what the Sumerians, if we take what the Sumerian texts say, the Anunnaki came here, they gave us the technology, they gave us government, they gave us religion, and it's known as the cradle of civilization. However, at one end of that cradle of civilization stood the bloodiest kingdom of Nimrods, known as Nineveh. Do some research on Nineveh. They were a bloodthirsty people that took their captives. They would capture their army, hook them with hooks connected by chains, hook them right through, and lead them back to Nineveh, and then start to dismember them, putting their body parts in piles before the inhabitants of the city. That's what they did for entertainment. Think about that. And then you wonder why that is just such a bloodthirsty part of the world today, where they're willing to turn around and do all of this. And whether it's a meme that they're creating, we know that people are dying in the Middle East. It's just who's causing their death. That's the question. How many of us want war? We beg for peace. We beg for equality. We beg for fraternity, the brotherhood of man and woman, the brotherhood of the human family. And yet our family, our human family, has been so segmented and so fractured that now the human family sitting down at dinner consists of 4 people, maybe, all texting to other people while dinner's being served. That's where we've gotten to, so fractal that nobody ever asked for anything except pass the peas, please. How fractured have we gotten? And who has done this to us? Who's created a work environment where both husband and wife have to work in order to provide for their family? Because if both husband and wife don't work, they lose everything. And their kids go without. Who set that system up? That's one that strikes close to home, especially here lately. We'll talk about that at the end of the show. But we're brought to this system, which we can now start to put together and piece together, because number one, our science has gotten good enough. Number two, thank goodness for the internet, because it has brought people together. It started to create a family of consciousness, which is starting to come together and understand that it's our caring for each other and understanding the truth. And yes, there are good aliens, if we want to call them that, but we're being controlled by the bad ones. And if you don't believe that, just look at what continues to happen in the world. And this has to be removed. This is what brings us to the fearful Armageddon, which isn't fearful at all, because it removes the fear from the planet. It removes the fear factor. It removes those forces that have separated us at the soul level. We all know our history's been changed. They're trying to change it now. Let's just take a look at the past 100 years, and this is where we're going to kind of start to bring it back. 100 years ago, almost everybody believed in God. Almost nobody believed in aliens. Unless you were from Aurora, Texas, you didn't believe in little green men. And that's only because in 1897, it's alleged that a UFO crashed in Aurora, Texas. 100 years later, if you believe in God, you're the oddity, because more people believe in aliens than believe in God. When I had checked in 2012, 63% of the people polled believed in aliens, extra life forms, not from this planet. 51% believed that a God, an almighty, all-knowing God existed. Interesting. So in 100 years, we've changed the belief system of a large portion of this planet. Not only that, when we go back and look at the history, we can see history changing now. Hey, I wonder how history is going to record Benghazi. I wonder how history is going to record the Ebola outbreak in Africa. I wonder how history is going to record the fact that one of the largest computer megaliths, or the head of one of the largest computer companies on earth, is facing trial in India for genocide because of trying a new vaccine there out on the people in India. I wonder how many of these people, these banksters that have been controlling this planet for the last 100 years, who have caused the death of well over 1 billion people. The 20th century has been the most bloodiest century ever. And when you look at those who have died because of war, of conflict, and of the blessings that those things have given us, death, famine, plague, all the other good things that go with it, we've lost close to 1 billion people on this planet. Now we're in a jubilee, or coming upon a jubilee year now. Is this going to be a rest period? Boy, I hope so. We could use it. So now let's take a look at where we are. We have two records, both records, the biblical record and the Sumerian record of the Anunnaki, both telling us that they are there's interdimensionals involved. One's a 4,500-year-old record, the one whose rule we are under. The other one gives us an account that tells us we are not genetically engineered from lower life forms, but we are children of the Most High, children of Yahuwah, and that our cousins and our family live in the dimensions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, 9, 10. However, there was a rebellion, and is a rebellion, probably based on what was caused by the covering cherub of Eden, who was no doubt in charge of genetic engineering. Why else would he think he had a dog in this fight? But once he separated us at the soul level, it was just a matter of farming humans to keep us in control. And every crop, every year, we had a new group of humans, and so we can slowly change what they learned. We can slowly change what they knew. We can slowly change their history and teach them anything that we want. And then we can herd them like cattle, make them live in cities, and force them to eat the food that we give them to eat. And we can have them do our will for us. They can give us our entertainment. They can kill each other off. They can provide us with loose energy. And they can turn around and be our subjects, be our pets. And they never have to know that they were ever connected to Source. And so we have aliens. We have reptilians. We have grays. We have the Ashtoreth Command. We have the Galactic Federation of Bull. All these three-dimensional aliens, we're here to save you. We've got the same symbols as the Anunnaki, but we're different. We're here to save you. Look at the symbols that are being put by these groups. And I love the symbols. As the star of the Galactic Federation of Light is the star of Molech, a god who requires live child sacrifice. How stupid can you get? Look at the symbols. The star of the Galactic Federation of Light. Go look it up on the internet. And then go look up the star of Molech. And go see what country flies that star, worships that star, controls other countries to worship that star. Yeah, look at that star. Because that indeed is the star of child sacrifice to the rebellion, which is using us as cattle, goyim cattle. And so we have the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews and are not, and are lying, who will be made to come before us and do obeisance. Interestingly enough, we have two groups involved. We have the Jesuits and we have the Zionists, and they make up our bankster system. That's a fact. When we look at who invented the bankster system, it's credited to the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were their symbol was two riders, because they all were so poor they could only afford one horse for two knights. Wait a minute, they were landowners in Europe. How were they poor? They couldn't even afford their own transportation. But what their symbol is, two knights on the same horse, traveling in the same direction to go secure Jerusalem, so that all the Christian pilgrims, and there was no first century Christians, they were followers of Jesus, the Messiah. But the fact of the matter is, they go back, these Knights Templar, they go back to Jerusalem, they kill everyone there, man, woman, child, Christian, Jew, Muslim, doesn't matter, and they start digging for something that was left there by whom the prophet, who the disciple Stephen in the first century called Molech worshippers. He essentially called them Egyptian Molech worshippers. You can find that in Acts, the 7th chapter, verses 42 through 43, where Stephen quotes the prophet Amos, and he says, was it speaking in the person of Yahuwah, the source, the singularity? He says, was it to me, O Israel, to whom you worshipped and made sacrifices those 40 years in the wilderness? No, it was to the tent of Molech, and to the star of the god Raphan, to whom you made images and sacrifices to, and for that I shall send you far beyond Babylon. And so the first century Molech worshippers were taken by General Titus back to Rome. 93,000 of them, according to the first century historian Josephus. And now we get the birth of Christianity, because it's through Emperor Constantine, a worshiper of Mithra, who is credited to be the pagan Jesus, but is indeed Tammuz. Tammuz is the reincarnate of Nimrod, the son of Syriamis, the queen of Samaria, wife of the first king Nimrod, who was made by the Anunnaki, the first sun god. Syriamis was made goddess of the earth, moon, and stars, and after she had Nimrod murdered, she became pregnant. And she claimed it was Nimrod incarnate, come back to be with his children. And so she gave birth to Tammuz, or Mithra, whom Constantine loved. And he loved him so much he had a 30-some-odd foot idol made of himself as Mithra. Now, in case you don't know, Mithra is a sun god. He has rays coming off of his head, the same as the Statue of Liberty does in the harbor of New York City. And so this is the birth of Christianity, the worship of Tammuz, the worship of the Holy Mother, Syriamis. And that is indeed what is represented by the Holy Roman Catholic Church / Empire, that is in conjunction, or was in conjunction, with the rise of the Nazis during the Second World War. and indeed does control through the corporate system every corporation on the face of the planet, including all religious corporations. So the Vatican controls all today, mostly the banking system, or through the banking system, and through the corporate system. All roads still lead to Rome. And the Third Reich was supposed to be an extension of the Holy Roman Empire. So let's take a look. Here we set the stage. The banksters are in charge. We know that they are made up of the Zionists and the Jesuits, the Synagogue of Satan, and the guard of the Vatican here, the armed guard, almost the police factor of the Vatican. Both, especially the Jesuits, are responsible for a lot of colleges educating our children today in the manner in which they so choose. And it's regarded to be some of the best education on the planet. Just a fact. When we go back 100 years, a little over 100 years, what we find is that President Woodrow Wilson was being blackmailed. And indeed, through the blackmail, he became a puppet pawn of the Illuminati, essentially the Rothschild banking cabal, which after were thrown out of the United States by President Jackson, were reestablished through the Federal Reserve System. What happened in 1914 was quite interesting. World War I broke out. And so here we have, for the first time ever, a major war, which takes place in Europe for the most part, but also in Russia on its western end because of Japan's attacking. But at that time, 1914 was probably the height of European colonization of the world. Go look at a colonization map of Africa. You'll see what I'm talking about. So the whole world was either colonized by Europe or owned by the Vatican, with the exception of Russia, which was controlled by the Tsar, and China, which was still controlled by, I guess, the dynasties and different kings, which are now regarded as the dragon family out of the Middle East. So they are strong and on the scene, and they don't like what they see going on this planet, that you can be sure of. But it is the Knights Templar, the modern day Knights Templar, the Jesuits and the Synagogue of Satan, which is controlling what's going on through the banking system, including what's going on in the Chinese stock market. And China's getting its butt whipped in the stock market right now. Major corrections. All of their profits from that they turned around and gained from the United States are just being eaten right up. But we're going to talk about how China got to be where it is today, and that's part of the control factor. 100 years ago, there was also in 1915 a Jubilee coming up, and that Jubilee year was 1916. Now, granted, World War I already started. We had war declared by the United Nations last year, which nobody really noticed. The United Nations, for the first time, I'm sorry, for the third time, put a coalition of nations together, 60 some odd nations to be, is what's made up in the coalition. And that coalition has the United Nations authority and declaration of war against extremism on this planet. Not just ISIS or Islamic extremism, but all extremism. Kind of like flying rebel flags, the KKK, that's extremism. Prejudiced, hate crimes, extremism. Of course, they're putting their finger on the scale as we say this. In other words, they're tilting things in the favor of making more things extreme, because the more extreme things become, the more they can send out and make it a police state, because there is a war against extremism. And this is the third time that the United Nations has put together a coalition of nations and sent them back to Iraq. This fulfills the prophecy in Revelation chapter 16, 12 through 15, of the gathering of the nations together for the great war of God the Almighty. It starts off by saying that the bowl of anger is poured upon the Euphrates, which is in Baghdad, runs right through the middle of Baghdad, and its waters are dried up, making way for the power of the kings of the east of Euphrates: Iran, China, India, and Russia. What could be considered the king of the north, that has basically, at least China in its powerhouse, is fastly becoming the largest economic force on the planet, only next to the United States. It just has to eliminate us and it becomes number one. And it's all controlled. The control that goes right back by who invented the bankster system. And now who's controlling the situation in the Middle East? Who's controlled the United Nations? Who thought ISIS was a good idea? You know, here's one of the things, Alfred, you talk about things that we changed. You and I, several months ago, actually, when we first went down this path, we talked about ISIS being connected to a company who had its headquarters in Washington, D.C. at 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue in the Ronald Reagan building. Integrated Systems Intelligence Services, or something similar to that, is what it was. And since we talked about that, they changed their name and their logo. They're SIS now. It's Systems Intelligence Services. Still the same company, but they just changed their name. They changed it after we exposed them. We took the power out of their sales. The same thing is what's happening in everything that I'll give you the most credit for, but so we've exposed, or you've exposed, or combined, we all have exposed the memes that have been playing out on us, and the memes seem to vanish and go away. Those control factors just vanish.
If I could,
please do.
Just mention here, you sent me this message. AI, artificial intelligence. Your postings on AI and the situation which currently appears to be carried out at this time around projects like Bluebird, which I guess means Blue Avian, and Blue Beam, along with Jade Helm 15, which I have not seen a posting on in over a week, besides something you had posted. 30 days ago, there were too many Jade Helm postings to count. Where did they all go?
Where did they go?
Jade Helm. Where did the Jade Helm meme go?
Yeah, you know, every meme that we got on has disappeared. It's vanished. Why? It was exposed for what it was. So instead of this artificial intelligence, now it's war games. Now, it doesn't mean that they've stopped, but all the fear-mongering has stopped. All the meme, oh, it's going to be martial law, that's gone away. We took the power out of it.
Well, I must say that there are other reporters will be carrying programs who are reporting in from the ground, and oppression in the United States in regions of the Jade Helm area, including California, has escalated on individuals. So I just wanted to add that.
And we figured that would happen because of who's involved. This is all special forces people. This isn't, you know, everyone who is involved in the Jade Helm 15 exercise, they are all part of special forces. These are the assassins and the snatch and grab go guys. These aren't your everyday infantry, or these aren't, you know, some little group. This is a joint special forces exercise. So these are the best of the best that are training right now. And they're training not only with their own, they're training with gear that we have no clue about. And that's probably one of the biggest situations. But still, the reporting that we've seen where everybody was talking about Jade Helm, and it only got more intense for the past several months, that all just vanished. It went away. Not that we have to stop worrying about it, or we should stop worrying about it, but we should still be concerned with what they are carrying out, because the fact is, knowledge is power, and accurate knowledge gives us power accurately, because then we know where to apply it at. We know where we can
right,
then
right.
focus that.
And now, today being August 4th, 2015, we have another set of up-and-coming memes, that being UN tetralunar eclipse, UN post-2015 development, Pope Francis Bergoglio, you know, all these kind of upper theater characters, the Whore of Babylon, the two-horned beast, the 10-horned beast, all of that is going to be activated coming September.
Okay.
And so we're about to enter an historic period in September, which we've been discussing, in what I like to call upper theater, which is where you can take the memes in Revelation 18 or 19 or any other place, and you can say, yeah, that's Bergoglio. Bergoglio's doing upper theater. Yeah, that's Obama.
Sure.
Obama's doing upper theater. Yeah, that's the UN. They're upper theater, i.e., they have an archetypal role. And then you have the great deception, and this is where I'd like to open up the discussion to this area as well, because you had mentioned his name, Flavius Josephus.
Okay.
That was the first deception, the first Jesus deception, because you have an historic figure, Jesus, who's born and leads a life, right? XYZ
Correct.
life. Then you have the Romans are trying to put down the rebellion, and they hire Flavius Josephus, who's the chief prophet and rebel, bring him to Rome as the chief propagandist. He writes, the revised history, and then that is cut and pasted into what we call the New Testament, so that the versions of the New Testament which contain the Hebrew prophecies are in there because Flavius Josephus was one of the leading prophetic experts who then got hired by the Romans, Goebbels style, as their propagandist. And that, and how that relates to the historical Jesus and what actually happened in his life is a gap that we don't know yet. We don't know that yet.
Now, you're talking about the gap from when he, let's say when the sacrifice was made, when he was impaled.
Yeah.
We'll cover that, because there's two different stories here. There's the biblical story that he was impaled.
No. This is not to go back to the incarnation life and the first deception. This is to come up to the second deception, the one that's about to be attempted to be rolled out now with the tetralunar eclipse in 2015, the one that we all saw Jade Helm coming, and, we all said, deception!
Okay, we'll stay more focused on where we are. Let's start this off then, or this segment off, with the synchronicity of 100 years ago. And this is where war breaks out in heaven, or those four spatial planes, dimensions 4, 5, 6, and 7. So there's a casting down of what happened, or a casting out of the spatial planes into the physical plane. Now, don't ask me to explain the science behind it, because I'm barely keeping up with the science that's needed to understand what I've got so far. We just don't have I just can't tell you how they are limited to be within the third dimension and can no longer leave. I don't know how physical they actually are. They may have been turned into aliens for all I know. But best indication is that we're at the higher levels, we are still dealing with interdimensionals that can cohabit in a human body. Hence, that's why I brought up Princess Diana's, according to her, she watched both the Queen of England and Prince Prince Philip transform themselves from their current human form into reptilian form and back, and they told her that if she told anybody, she would be killed. Well, and she told her maidservant, and she's dead. So what can I say? It's just the way it is. But it seems to be almost public knowledge among the royally connected that Diana also tried to commit suicide 3 times when she was pregnant with William. And she referred to her in-laws as reppies and said that those people weren't human, or these people aren't human. So those things are pretty well known within the royal connections, at least according to the ones that I have that are truly part of that little upper echelon that you get little tidbits back from. Regardless, so we're dealing with interdimensionals plus whatever else there may be. The war breaks out. What happens 100 years ago? 2 cycles of the Jubilee. The Jubilee's would have been on in 1916, which means it would have ended, or would have started in 1915 and would have ended in 1916, which means the new year that was set after the Jubilee would have been 1917. Go open up a history book. 1917 saw the United States of America get dragged into the First World War. It saw the Bolshevik uprising overtake Russia and overthrow the Tsar and his empire and establish communism, flying the red shield. It's extremely well documented that the Bolshevik uprising was funded with the Tsar's own money by the Oppenheimer and Rothschild families. In 1917, the Tsar of Russia and his family were murdered, as per the prophecy per Amschel Meyer Rothschild 100 years previous, when they tried to form the first world government at the treaties of Versailles. No, I'm sorry, it was not the Treaty of Versailles. It was the Congress of Vienna 100 years ago. It was the Treaty of Versailles. I'm sorry, the Congress of Vienna in 1814. It was the Treaty of Versailles in 1918 or 1919 that they actually signed it. But still, they tried to pull this off 100 years earlier, and it was the Tsar Alexander I that was the fly in the ointment, because the banks did not control his money as they did the German Empire, the French Empire, and the English Empire. All 3 countries' banks were controlled by the Rothschild family at that time. They captured the final one when Napoleon lost to Wellington at Waterloo. So since in 1912, they came back and captured the Bank of America, or actually the Second Bank of America, which was their bank established here in the States until, as I said earlier, President Jackson threw them back out. So you got these things coming together in 1917, along with the Balfour Declaration, which the Rothschilds put pressure on the British monarchy. As a matter of fact, it was Lord Balfour himself who drew up the Balfour Agreement, making suggesting that Palestine be returned to the Jews as their homeland. What happened in World War I, if I remember my military history correct too, is that the English captured Palestine from the Ottoman Empire. So now the English, whose bank was controlled by the Rothschilds, could offer Palestine as a homeland to the Jews. However, the Jews didn't want to go. It took another, and at the end of the First World War, we also had the formation of the League of Nations, who Woodrow Wilson himself wrote the charter for, but couldn't get Congress to agree to join. So now you got a problem. what's the largest economic powerhouse, or soon to be, on earth won't join the League of Nations. And no Jews are moving to Palestine. They like it in Bavaria. They like it in Poland. They like it in Europe. It's their homeland. Their ancestors have lived there since time immemorial, at least since they were brought there by the Roman armies in the first century. As a matter of fact, when the Zionists had their first meeting in Basel, Switzerland, the first Congress of Zion, they were supposed to have it in Munich, Germany. Only the local Orthodox Hebrew community chased them out of Munich. And so they had to have their meeting in Basel, Switzerland. And that's where the letters of the Protocol of the Learned Elders of Zion, a plagiarized hoax. How do you plagiarize a hoax? I'm not sure. But that's what it's officially. It's officially a hoax, and it's been plagiarized. How you plagiarize a hoax, I don't know, but whatever. But it reads, if you have an open mind and read the letters of the Protocol of the Learned Elders of Zion, you will see exactly what Henry Ford said in 1922 when he said, yep, it looks like the truth to me. They have control of what is going on in our economy and our country. And for that, he almost lost Ford Motor Company because the Zionists boycotted Ford. And guess what? They all endorsed Dodge, which put the emblem, the Star of Molech, right on their radiator. Seriously, go look at the old Dodges. They were the Dodge brothers. It was a Zionist-backed motor company, and they put the Star of Molech right on the radiator. That's the car that they wanted all the Jews to buy. It's the Star of Molech. It was approved. It was kosher. There you go. But look at what had happened. The world changed drastically right after the Jubilee was over. And the world was captured by the League of Nations. Without the Jews moving to the Holy Land, without the United States being part of the League of Nations, another war was needed. And instead of Japan attacking their next door neighbor, this time they go all the way across the other side of the Pacific to attack the United States to get it involved in the war. We're on hold.
No, keep on going.
Okay. Okay. Here's the situation. We go to war, and we're involved in a Second World War. And what causes it? The rise of Germany from Nazism. Now, when you look at how the Nazi Party came to be, it was made up of the German Workers' Association. The initials for German workers would be NA. The German word for work is Arbeit, A. And made up of the Zionist, ZI, Nazi. And where were they funded from? They were funded partly from the United States by Prescott Bush, who was working for Brown Brothers Harriman, whose father-in-law was Herbert Walker, a well-known Nazi supporter here in the United States. Prescott Bush was funneling U.S. funds to the Dice family in England, who was then continuing to pass those funds on to the Nazi Party in Germany, funding the Nazi war machine. And they were not to be outdone by the Vatican, because it was Pope Pius XII, I believe, that was backing Hitler as well as an extension of the Thousand-Year Reich. Now, Hitler's Nazi Party was subdivided in several ways. Hitler was a Catholic, among other things, but Himmler was a pagan. He was very into the Norse gods and wanted to resurrect the Norse gods, the Germanic gods, to bring them back. And he was a member, I believe he's a confirmed member of the Vril Society, which came into being during the First World War, more so at the close of the First World War. The Vril Society, their main goal, or where they draw their power from, is child sacrifice. So you have the Nazis adopting child sacrifice through the Vril Society as part of their cult, and they're being guided as well by the papal system, who also chooses the Pope by the circle, by the ninth circle, which also includes a child sacrifice. And what's the whole upshot of when World War II finally ends and we find out the horrific things that have happened to the Orthodox Jews in Germany? We call it a Holocaust. 6 million Jews is said to have been put to death by the Nazi party. Wait a minute. Yeah, by the German workers and the Zionists, by the Molech people, the pagan Molech worshippers put the Orthodox Jews to death. And they called it a Holocaust. You know what Holocaust means, Alfred? It means whole burnt offering to God. It was a sacrifice. What was it a sacrifice for? It was a sacrifice to get Jews to move to Palestine. And once Israel was created, the Rothschilds gave free passage to anyone who wanted to move. They paid the bill. Go look at Tel Aviv. You can see all the streets there. Oppenheimer Street, Rothschild Street. They're all listed there. All the Illuminati names are in the streets of Tel Aviv. Seriously. So we see the control here. And the control comes down to the same thing as was talked about when we look at the scriptures. There always seems to be this struggle between Babylon and Egypt. It talks about the king of the north and the king of the south. Many roles were played by the king of the north. The king of the south always seemed to be Egypt. And we don't, our story, the scriptures and what we follow all comes out of Babylonian Anunnaki belief or Egyptian religious belief. Everything taught in the churches today, everything taught in religion can find its roots in the Anunnaki system. And when we look on our money, what do we see? The Egyptian empire. So you've got the Vatican controlling the money, but the money is controlled by the Egyptian Molech worshippers. And indeed, that's where Molech worship starts, with the Egyptian god Set, who was actually a bisexual god in Egypt. He became a homosexual more as he went further east. But that's where it originated from, and that's why that prophecy goes back to the Holy Land. Now, I just want to visit this. In the Holy Land, the first Passover started really when the 10th plague. The 9th plague was the sun turning dark. The 10th plague involved an extraterrestrial or an interdimensional killing off the firstborn of Egypt. The Israelite nation then follows a cloud which opens up the Red Sea, and they cross the Red Sea. They get partway across before they camp out. And down from this cloud comes a pillar of fire, which stops the Pharaoh's army from following. And for 40 years, the nation of Israel follow this cloud throughout the promise of the Holy Land, the wilderness. I'm sorry, they didn't get to the Holy Land first. They didn't want to go in. They got this lenticular cloud that's covering roughly 2 million people that shoots down a laser at night, gives them fire at night, and they're afraid to go into the Canaanite Holy Land and claim it as their own. Now think about that concept for a minute. So God gets pissed. He says, get back out in the wilderness, and you can stay there for the next 40 years. Or say Yahuwah gets pissed. And that's what happens. And so for 40 years, they're covered by a lenticular cloud and some sort of light show at night that gives them light. And their clothes don't wear out. They stay in perfectly good shape. So tell me this isn't extraterrestrial. Let's move it back to where we are now. War breaks out in heaven. Satan and his archonic force get thrown down to the third dimension. War breaks out on earth. We get enslaved to a one world type government type situation. We have the fall of a whole empire. We have the establishment of the Holy Land. We have total, what seems to be pushed toward a total control after the Shemitah year and after the Jubilee. 50 years later, after the next Jubilee, war breaks out in the Holy Land. Israel, after the Jubilee year is over, captured in the Six-Day War in 1967, captures Jerusalem. Glory be, now we can build the Solomon's Temple again. Once we get that Islamic piece of junk out of there. And in order to do that, we got to wipe out Islam, don't we? Yeah. See the problem? See the problem? Yeah. That's an interesting fact that also the Vatican owns over 60% of the city of Jerusalem. It's probably close to 70% now, including everything around the Temple Mount. They own all the real estate. General Titus is back in town, sounds like. So, Alfred, about 2 years ago, you and I sat down in 2013, in July, as I recall, around July 3rd or 2nd, and we did a video together, much like this one. And I said that the end of the tetralunar eclipse was going to be very different than the way it starts out. And we've seen meme after meme play throughout this eclipse period. And now that the last solar eclipse and the last tetralunar eclipse are coming together, we are at the door of a brand new Jubilee year, when all debt is supposed to be forgiven, when all slaves are supposed to be forgiven, when the cosmic clock gets to be reset and everything starts from zero, or at least Earth clock anyway, maybe not the cosmic clock. But Earth clock anyway gets to be reset, where the Pope has declared his Jubilee and the Zionists are having their Jubilee. The Zionist Jubilee is the one we're following. It starts on the night of the 22nd of September at sundown, because they follow a Hebrew calendar and their day starts at sundown. So the first full day of Jubilee will be September 23rd. The Pope will be at the White House visiting the Obama, one of the three city-states, the military arm of the three independent city-states of the world. The religious arm is the Vatican. The banking arm is the City of London. And the military arm is Washington, D.C. And on the 24th, the Pope will go to Congress. The thing that has caused desolation, that has caused the deaths of hundreds of millions of humans for the past 2,000 years, since the days of the Roman Empire, that symbolism will be standing in Congress, a place that is supposed to be free of religious intervention, the separation of church and state. But that's okay. He's coming as a political figure, perhaps, because let's face it, we had Netanyahu, the head of the Zionists, here a few months ago. What are we selling out? Are we selling tickets here? Anybody wants to come and speak? We paid them a speaking engagement and invite them in? Oh, what's going on here? Why are world leaders, especially the two of the biggest influential world leaders, speaking before our Congress, telling Americans what they need to be doing? I don't know. But we are going to see exactly what it says in Daniel, and what Jesus quoted in Matthew the 24th chapter, around the 14th, 15th verses, where it talks about the thing that causes, the disgusting thing that causes desolation, standing where it ought not. Now, disgusting? Catholic Church disgusting? Let's take a look at their child abuse record. Let's take a look at their involvement in child trafficking, in drug laundering money. Let's take a look at the Pope's own record, where he stands on arms deals, because it was his dealing while he was a priest in Argentina that set up the deal between the Argentine government and the French government for the Exocet missiles, which sank English warships in the Falkland Island War. You're very welcome, Your Majesty. I hope you enjoyed that to your Navy. I wonder what Elizabeth thinks when she goes and visits the Pope at the Vatican. You guys sunk my battleship. Yeah, twice. So there's the control. Where's this control coming from? Whistleblowers tell us we got aliens. We have people channeling telling us we have aliens. Oh, they're here, they're good. If they're good, why aren't things getting better? We had, I love the synchronicity of this because it brought more aliens into my life, or at least more interdimensionals. And we talked about this one before, Stanley Fulham, Major Stanley Fulham, retired U.S. Air Force NORAD. NORAD controls all UFO and alien extraterrestrial information on North America for the United States and Canada. NORAD is one of the two government agencies that are above the Freedom of Information Act. The White House is the other one. Stanley Fulham said the aliens were coming after we had a hard time. So we can expect some sort of intervention here, but let's look at where we are in this tetrad moon eclipse. At the end of this tetrad moon eclipse, along with the solar eclipse, so we have both the moon, which the Jews follow, and the sun, which the Christians follow, the sun worshippers or the Anunnaki follow, the Egyptians followed it too, but with the church we have Sirianus and Tammuz. With the Zionists, we have Nimrod and the sun. So we've got Islam, we've got Judaism, and we've got Christendom all together in this situation. And those are the controlling forces at work right now. We can pretty much figure that as the interdimensional Gabriel put it, the Prince of Persia is still in Persia. Take a look at the nuclear arms deal that Israel is all up in arms about. Could an archonic life form be controlling Persia? Could reptilian life forms be controlling the queen and her consort? According to Diana, they are. And what's Obama? Let's take a look at the financing of Hitler. The Nazis, which created the Holocaust, and they're being backed by the Zionists and the Jesuits. Do we have any Nazis here? Well, under Operation Paperclip, the official word is, we brought back about 1,000 to 3,000 scientists, one of our bronze friends who said that the last card would be the alien card, by the way. And on top of that, we brought back everybody else that was involved in intelligence and anything else, approximately 50,000 people, scientists, security experts, members of the Gestapo, members of the SS, were all brought in under Operation Paperclip. Who's responsible for that? Prescott Bush. Interesting. Prescott Bush was arrested for lending aid to the enemy during the Second World War. What kind of sentence does that carry? Lending aid to the enemy. He had all of his assets seized. Now remember, he was working for Brown Brothers Harriman. That Harriman being Averell Harriman. Averell Harriman was governor of New York and later became ambassador to England. He was in charge of the Lend-Lease Act put there by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a member of the oldest banking family in the United States, the Bank of New York, which is now Mellon Bank. Brown Brothers Harriman later becomes Chase Manhattan, which later becomes Chase Bank, which is a Bush-owned bank. Now, I want you to think very carefully here. It was Prescott Bush, Senator Prescott Bush's son, George Herbert Walker Bush. Did I get that right? See, Daddy Bush, anyway. Yeah, George H. as opposed to George W. George H. Bush becomes head of the CIA. He's implicated in Kennedy's death prior to that, but he on the periphery, he's implicated, but he becomes head of the CIA. Not only does he become head of the CIA, but he's instrumental in opening up China along with Henry Kissinger, so China can become an economic powerhouse, indeed the economic powerhouse it is today. Wouldn't you have liked to have been the George Bush and Henry Kissinger setting up that financial deal, using making the connections to Chase Bank and to, no doubt, the different Zionist banks, and setting up some sort of Federal Reserve Bank. No wonder the Jesuits wanted to get a stranglehold on the banking system of China. So look who set the whole thing up. George H. and Henry Kissinger made China the powerhouse it is today. A Zionist and a Nazi. Am I wrong? A Zionist and a Nazi made China the power it is today. What's next on the agenda? What happens at the end of the Jubilee year and they decide to go back to work? Well, when the Pope gets in front of the United Nations on September 25th and gives his blessing to the post-2015 development agenda, the Jubilee year will have officially been kicked off with this new agenda, this new world order agenda. And the Pope is going to have his own Jubilee starting in November of 2015. And the Hebrew Jubilee or the Zionist Jubilee will be ending in October. The Pope's Jubilee will be ending in December. My personal Jubilee, which starts the fourth week in October and ends the fourth week in October, October 2016. Interestingly enough, it's now almost 50 years that I've been involved in this, since my true calling started at the age of 9. Boy, it's been a long time and a hectic life, Alfred. Parts that I don't want to remember, and unfortunately do. But that's my own situation. So I've got my own personal Jubilee year coming up here. But what happens after the Jubilee year ends? What can we expect? The Pope in September, at the end of the Tetrad blood moon, blessing off the New World Order agenda, starting the Jubilee, is starting the prophecy in Revelation 17 and 18, where the whore of Babylon rides the wild beast that is brought to power in Revelation 13, who's given the throne of the great dragon, which was thrown out of the four-dimensional multiverse itself. Does everybody have that? When you read Revelation 13, it says that the great dragon, once it was thrown out of heaven, gives its throne to this beast government, which is formed at the end of World War I, the League of Nations. The beast has 7 heads, like the dragon has. It has 10 horns, like the dragon has. But it comes out of the sea of turmoil, and it is a composite of different animals: a bear's feet, a leopard's body, lion's heads. Let's see, lions, bears. Oh my. What countries are lions and bears? England and Russia? How about that? And the number of heads, 7 world powers. The number of horns, 10 kingdoms ruling those world powers, including England and the United States, or the city of London and Washington, D.C. today. Guess what? Rome gets 2 horns, one for Rome and one for Constantinople. So the horn, which has been given to Rome, which has been handed to the Vatican, is ruling with the other 3 horns. Boy, it sounds like we got a lot of horns going on here. Well, yeah, they represent kingdoms. And these indeed are horns of beastly governments which are controlling what's going on. So this great dragon, which is hurled down, gives its throne, its power, its seat of authority to first the League of Nations, become United Nations, now going to become the one world power. But the whore of Babylon is riding it. And in Revelation 17, the scarlet-colored wild beast signified, the color scarlet is given to it, and this signifies a royal role, royal significance, turns on the harlot and exposes the harlot, makes her naked, and eats her fleshy parts. Exposing the harlot, you mean like as in drug trafficking, child abuse, child murder, child sacrifice? That would be enough. Exposing it for its wrongdoing, exposing it for its control and what's been going on in this planet, because if it claims to be in charge, guess what? It gets the responsibility of all the problems that it has caused. And that's what we read in the prophecy. And what happens is that the beast system, the beast government, turns on the harlot, and we should be able to witness the destruction of religion based on the laws which are already in place by the United Nations. Last year's law, which they adopted, the end of extremism, a war against extremism, is only complemented by the United Nations law on freedom of religion. We have the right to worship any way, provided, according to Section 2, Paragraph 1, our preferred method of worship does not become a hazard to public safety. Like running into a cafe, blowing yourself up and killing all the non-believers. Like storing guns and weapons to go up against other people from other religions, even in our own country. Like killing Whitey, or killing the black man, or uprising against different symbols of power that the archonic powers that are ruling this planet have planted among us. The separation methods used to separate us from each other. See, it's all been a separation. And now there's going to become a unity. And we're going to start to see the beast system exercise its authority. You want to end poverty? Why don't we take all the gold, all the wealth that religion has and redistribute it among the people? Wouldn't that end poverty? And then the dragon families could keep all their gold. Let's end the Anunnaki-inspired death religion with its imitation gods, with its archonic gods, its interdimensional, three-dimensional alien beings who want to help us be better people. Let's forget all that and let's start exercising our own personal power. In Revelation 18, it says, "Get out of her, my people, if you do not want to share part in her plagues," speaking about the judgment against religion. Leave religion. Why does it say that? If Yahuwah was religious, why does he say, "Get out of Babylon the Great, leave the Anunnaki religion"? It's right there, Revelation chapter 18. We go back to chapter 17, and it says an eighth king is formed. They're going to be forming that eighth king in September. They're going to let it rest for a year and gain power. And then in 2017, that eighth king will rise. Someone who the Zionists feel can turn around and usurp the Jubilee year away from the power of the Pope. Someone perhaps whose mother was dearly loved around the planet. Someone who young people will look to as a guiding light for the future. Someone with a royal connection. Someone with a royal connection, perhaps back through Jesus if he really didn't die. You see, without the false history put into place, as you pointed out earlier, Alfred, you could never get the story of Mary Magdalene being impregnated by Jesus and then her going from Africa to the Merovingian kings, and then that seed of Jesus being passed on through the Merovingian kings, coming out in the House of Windsor, being passed down to His Highness Prince William himself, whose mother, dearest woman, no sarcasm intended there, was sacrificed for what she said about her shape-shifting queen and her consort, Prince Philip. Her son, whoever he may be. She did try to commit suicide 3 times for a reason while she was pregnant with him. Why would a mother want to do that with her own unborn child? When we read the protocol, it says that they will choose their king and that they will end religion. They will kill God. They will end God. And so, if the cycle of 2017 is going to be repeated by these same entities that came down here 100 years ago with their archonic forces, the satanic rebellion, which just brought blood and guts to this planet and death on a wholesale level, a military industrial complex whose main focus is to kill all humans. Indeed, even with the SALT treaties and the reduction in nuclear arms, there's still enough nuclear. Fukushima is enough nuclear technology by itself to destroy this planet, and it's going to burn for another 30 years. Good thing we got the 2045 initiative coming up, Alfred, where if their meme is carried out and they have power, that all humans will die and become, all biological humans will die as they become nanobots. And the nanobots don't die. And so if you have the money to get a nanobot body, you can become a god. You can become just like God, if he doesn't take his soul back, that is. But you know what will happen most of all, Alfred? There will be nanobot host bodies to these archons who cannot fully shape shift in the third dimension, who must co-join a human soul, and inhabit a human body. Look at the disregard that the ruling class has for the lower classes. America's not supposed to have any class. We're all supposed to be one. Big joke. The middle class in Europe, I just read the other day, the average income of the middle class in Europe makes over $100,000 a year. The average income of the middle class in the United States is about $36,000. Of course, everything's more expensive in Europe. We have a lot more land here and a lot more oil. But still, there's a big disparity here, and it's getting less and less every year. Inflation is eating it apart. Inflation has destroyed this country. All the jobs got sent to China. Why would all the jobs get sent to a country that a Zionist and a Nazi made popular? Well, who's getting rich on this deal? You see, we're left holding the bag. We're being controlled in a way we don't even understand. And this isn't secret knowledge. It's public knowledge that George H. Bush, turned around and opened up China for trade, along with Henry Kissinger under the Nixon administration. It's part of history that they will not teach you. But it's there. And so all the profiteering, all the racketeering to put this planet in a state of debt to the tune of $1.4 quadrillion, I can't even think about a number that high, $1.4 quadrillion we owe the Zionists and Jesuits. Pretty good. The way I see it is if you get rid of half of them, there goes half the debt. Get rid of the other half, there goes the other half of the debt, and we can live free. And indeed, that's where we are supposed to be. So what can we look for in the future? More mind control. But we are going to see a lot of attention being paid at the end of this tetrad moon eclipse. We are going to see the Pope exercising the whore of Babylon's muscle. And I don't care if you want to call New York City Babylon the Great or not. The fact is, the world's representative of all world religion will be blessing the new world order. That's just a fact. And they're declaring a holiday.
Now, there are, I just wanted to point this, that we're now at the 2-hour mark, which is sort of
where we go.
Yeah. And so there are a lot of themes here that are still left. And they're the themes of that you've talked about, the Lamb returning with the heavenly hosts, which, you know, and no, but wait, let me finish what I'm going to say. And so what I'd like to do is this. We're now in the month before the tetralunar eclipse. And that is to reconvene our panel just after, at the beginning of October, after September the September 23rd to 28th period, so that at the beginning of October, we can take an assessment on just what just happened and where are we going. Because we have built up so much knowledge about what's going to happen. We're going to sit back and get our popcorn and watch this. And so after the September 23rd to 28th period, we'll gather again at the first Tuesday of October to assess what just happened and where are we going from there on. You know, there's a saying that the struggle now is for the timeline of 2017.
Correct.
And is it going to be a sort of a soulless, the New World Order's soulless robotoids break off and go their way? Or, you know, what is the future going to bring? That's something that we can't address now because we simply run out of time.
Not a problem.
And
So,
yeah, but you had something of a personal level of a personal nature on two levels. One, your continuing program to bring people to the knowledge of the books that of the book that you've written, and you're getting it to them. And number two, an issue in your family. So this is an opportunity now to talk about that.
Absolutely, and this is I do appreciate that, Alfred, and I just want to somewhere I got my settings messed up. Hold on, there we go. When all those spells hit escape. Let me say this first. I don't expect anything really significant to happen over the Jubilee period. We should see ISIS raising their head. We're going to see memes continue. We're going to see more artificial intelligence or archonic influence. I want to make a little connection here. Influence of archonic or arcane type thinking that continues to separate the masses. We're going to see more of those social issues arise. However, we're also going to see some sort of effect from the Jubilee to put us in that feel-good situation. So I'm not really expecting to see a whole lot of gloom and doom. We've been talking about an economic reset. The debt just keeps on getting bigger. I don't think anybody could have ever expected the dollar would have lasted this long. I know economists are scratching their heads wondering what's going on. That's always a situation that we have to be aware of. And that kind of brings us to my next situation here. And this is on a personal note. And first I'm going to say that I do appreciate everyone listening to us tonight. And I hope that you all appreciate the information that we continue to bring, because we do our best in order to deconstruct this so that we have a good knowledge and understanding of what to expect, and so that we can prepare, and so that we don't fall victim to the snares, at least at the soul level, because it's our connection to each other and to our cosmic family and to the creative forces that are going to bring us all through this. There's probably very little that we have to do once we make that soul connection. And it's not that we're going to go anywhere. We have to rehabilitate this earth, and we ourselves have to be rehabilitated first. We have to get back to that pure, dynamic energy connection that's within us, and we have to have our DNA resolved and fixed. So we do have a positive future. We're going to see some interesting things occur. But the next year, I'm hoping, because we have a dual Jubilee, things are going to be quiet. And so we'll have some time to prepare. That being said, I've not kept it a secret that I was planning on making a move and going off the grid. What I had kept a secret was the reason why. I prefer electricity and entertainment and internet and talking to my friends, but there was a call for family. Unfortunately, my son has hit a difficult time. He started a new family and was doing quite well. Bought himself a new house. Him and his bride were doing excellently, and they've enjoyed a very good life, and they still do enjoy a good life. 2 years ago, or just about 2 years ago, I was told that I was going to become a grandfather. That was great. And indeed I did. I have a grandson. He was born in November. Since then, I was told I was going to become a grandfather for a second time. The issue is that when my grandson was born, my son could no longer afford the payments on his house, nor could he afford his house. What was a two-income family became a one-income family, and with the needs of the baby, his wife couldn't work. I'm not a very good babysitter, although I have done it before, but I'm not a very good I couldn't be a wet nurse at all, but we're trying to do our own to help the situation, and we thought we had it figured out. He is actually, when my grandson turns 2 the next week, the sheriff's department will sell his house from underneath him. His house is about 40 to 45% underwater. He can't afford the payments, nor can he afford to sell it. He can't sell a house that's devalued that much. He can't afford to take the hit. It would be impossible. So come November, I'm looking at having my son and my first grandson, his pregnant wife, losing their house and being left homeless. Oh, yes, I could have I already offered them to come here. However, his 2 younger brothers live here with me, and it's a 3-bedroom house, and having the number of adults and children in the house would make it a little bit cramped. It's not that big. Our plan was to move off I was going to move off the grid with him. We identified a great location, a place that has expansion for his future family, a place that's self-sufficient, where the kids can run and enjoy a natural setting, where they don't have to be faced with the problems that we're being faced with here. Everything was into place right on up until last Thursday. It was our plan to close this deal and be moved this coming month and be up there starting September 1st. So Alfred, if this hadn't occurred, you and I would not be together more than likely come October, but now this will make sure that we were back together, I'm sure. So we're facing a bit of a financial crisis, and we're facing more so a family crisis in finding a place for my son to exist. And the place still exists. The problem is that the people that had the financing in place for us decided that they wanted to just sell it outright, and they no longer want to hold the note. We do not qualify for conventional financing because of the way that the laws are challenged. We cannot turn around and do anything but delay the situation, which is in process now by my son declaring bankruptcy. It's not going to stop the sheriff's sale. It will just delay it by a couple of months. So we're left in really a difficult situation. And with the financing falling through, I'm hoping that our listeners might be able to help a little bit. And the people that have been with us for the past 7 years since we actually started doing this, I guess it's been more close to 6 years, but 7 years ago, I wrote Letters to Earth and put it out there with the message. And I started giving away free copies of free PDF copies of Letters to Earth. And I gave hundreds and hundreds of copies away. And now I'm asking for some help from all of you. If you could please make a donation, and it doesn't have to be big. The widow's mite is greatly appreciated. I look at some of the numbers from some of the interviews or some of the panels that we've done, and thousands of people listen to us with just a few dollars. It can make a difference in a whole family's life. And if you can make that donation, and I'll give you the website in just a minute, but if you can make just a few dollar donation, I'll be more than happy to send you a copy of Letters to Earth, a PDF copy of Letters to Earth. You Can Survive Armageddon. It would be my pleasure and my thank you personally for helping my son, my family out.
Very good. Very good. Tell us the website where.
It is listed on the GoFundMe website. It is naturally the normal HTTP backslash, backslash semicolon www.gofundme.com backslash, and this is the important part, B32AU5T5K. I'll repeat that again. B as in boy, 32, A as in apple, U as in
Umbrella.
umbrella, thank you. 5 Thomas 5K. Again, B32AU5T5K. And that's at www.gofundme.com. And this was supposed to be our dream, and I'm hopefully we can still attain that. I'm hoping that dreams do come true. I have this vision in the back of my head of a pregnant woman standing in a snowstorm barefoot, and it's not one I particularly care to see in real person, or I have to kind of face. So I'm hoping by the good graces of all of you and the love that we share in the cosmos, and just the law of the cosmos itself, where whatever we give, we get back tenfold.
You get back to you. Well, Peter, thank you. And I know that people who have followed you, and I think that you're unusual because you're taking the Bible and the prophecies and the hermeneutics in it, not from a religious standpoint, but from a scientific standpoint. So that's what I find very unusual. Yeah, and that you were making a six-figure salary before you got into this interdimensionally, lots of interdimensionally stuff around you yourself. And so now I would urge people who can and who are interested in and who would like to make good things happen for Peter and his family to go to the GoFundMe.com website. And, I think that we've been able to demonstrate, everything that we've been calling has been happening, including, now we have the one-horned beast, Obama, Pope Bergoglio is hugely popular. The UN, supposedly they have 75 to 80% of the human population and trained to their AI, artificial intelligence, which may be the Lucifer AI. That's kind of a thought that I have. Lucifer, the rebellious AI.
Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly. And so the book of Revelation and some of the other prophecies are kind of maps to this time, and we're like calling it. And so that's what's happening here. And we're coming up to some of the really interesting chapters. And right after this, we'll have this extravaganza, supposedly, of the universal fleet, blah, 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 coming in. So, we're down to the 11th hour, and I think that's always been. And Peter, we really appreciate your work. We support it, and we look forward to seeing you here again on the first Tuesday of October, so that we can, look and interpret what has just gone down and give some perspective going forward. And we really support and wish the best for you and your family, in the meantime.
Well, thank you very much, Alfred.
And we'll put all of the links into the article accompanying this.
Thank you. We do have a fantastic future, and we are finally at a point where we can track and see the actual gates, if you want to call it that, as they open, and we can start to see these things happen. Revelation isn't exactly prophecy. It's more along the things that John saw happening.
Right.
And so, you know, we've got artificial intelligence. We've got whistleblowers talking about aliens. We know the intent of the Jesuits and the Zionist power. We know the control that they have on this planet. It's not a secret. It's just understanding how they're going to unleash it, and then what we need to do to get out, to preserve ourselves. And it all comes back to the same thing. We need to live our life in love. It takes us out of that beta fear and puts us into a planning state, a state of love, a state of openness, a state of where we can start to design our futures. And but most of all, it keeps us away from that fear. And in that alpha state, we make that connection at the soul level, not just back to source, but to each other. And as we can make that connection deeper within our soul or within our consciousness, we come up with that unity thinking. Because it's not all doom and gloom. Most people leave out the best part, where it says that there would be a great crowd that no man could number that would make it through on this positive timeline, from every nation, from every tribe, and every language. So it's not just a few, but many will wake up to this. So the love that we share here, you know, that I know I can feel from so many of our listeners, that they give us so much positive feedback and say, this is so wonderful. So it's that love that keeps us in alpha, that alpha love, that is going to let us go through this like a hot knife through butter. We should be totally free of fear and stay totally connected at the soul level, both to source and to each other, and seek knowledge, truth, and most of all, seek love. And I pass my love on to everyone. May the cosmos reward us all tenfold for our generosity. Love and blessings to all. Love and blessings, Alfred.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you on the other side of the tetralunar eclipse.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.